There we have got a story today coming from the book of Samuel, chapter 4. But in this particular story, Samuel doesn't show up, but a lot of the people he was working with and working around are in the story, and it is an important one for what happens in it. All right, at this time, the big problem the Israelites were having was with the Philistines. And part of the problem was that the Israelites weren't doing such a good job in following God. You may remember from earlier lessons that Eli, the high priest, was pretty old and he wasn't able to do as much. And his sons were priests, but they were bad guys. They were not doing things that they were supposed to do, and then they were doing things they were not supposed to do. And Eli had not disciplined them, and God had already sent a message through Samuel that things were going to end badly for the whole family. So even though Eli's okay himself, he's going to be punished in all of this, and his whole family from then on. And the way that takes form, in part, also punishes the Israelites for their problems. Of course, the Philistines are always going to be a problem for them, and they had had a problem you may remember that Samson had dealt with. Well, now we've got the army of Israel gathering together and going to fight the Philistines, but the Philistines win and they kill 4,000 of the Israelite soldiers. So, of course, that's pretty demoralizing for the Israelites, and they fall back and regroup and try to think of what to do. And somebody comes up with the idea of, hey, we should take the Ark of the Covenant with us. Now, the Ark of the Covenant, you may remember, had been constructed during the time of Moses according to God's instructions. And essentially, it was a box that was carried about on poles because you were not allowed to touch it. And it was to be used for communicating with God, and it was sort of a focus when people would have worship services for God. And it was not like an idol where people would pray to the statue and hope that their God would do something for them. This was an entirely different way of dealing with God. This was the real God, and he had rules about how you did things. Well, these folks thought that, oh, okay, if we're taking the Ark of the Covenant with us, then we're taking God with us, and he'll fight for us and win the battle for us. So, problem there being that they understood a little bit about God, but not enough. God doesn't appreciate being treated this way as if he were some kind of magic box and he would just do whatever you wish if you did the right thing. Well, they take him off. In fact, Eli is old, he can't see, and so he stays back at, at the city where normally the ark was kept, and his sons go out with the people taking the ark. So, again, these guys should have known better, but as we know, they were not following God and did whatever they wanted to do. So they go out. When the Ark of the Covenant arrives in the camp of the Israelites, and we're talking about the Israelite army, the Israelites are empowered, they are invigorated, and they start cheering, and it's so loud that the ground shakes. And we think, is that possible? Yes, it's possible. Some people who have gone to large football games will find that when the crowd gets real excited, it is a deafening noise and they can feel things moving. Well, the Philistines hear this and they get scared because they're going, what in the world is this? And the thing is, the Philistines know something about the Israelites. They know that God had done things for his people and got them out of Egypt. And even though they don't understand much about God, they know God is real and they are frightened, but they encourage each other and they say, okay, men, we have to hold together or they're going to beat us. And so they are brave. They fight the Israelites and they beat the Israelites again. And the Israelites lose 30,000 soldiers in this. and it's so bad they run away. Um, Eli's sons get killed. The Ark of the Covenant is captured by the Philistines and taken off. And the word gets back to Eli. Someone manages to escape and tells him, and he's hearing bad news. All three things: they lost the battle and with all these soldiers, and his sons have died. But the thing that gets him is hearing that the Ark of the Covenant has been captured. That he falls over and hits his head. It says that he was a large man, and the way he lands, his neck is broken, and Eli dies. Uh, One of his sons has a wife who's about to have a baby, and the shock of hearing this, it's not so much her husband dying as her husband dies, her father-in-law is dead, and the Ark of the Covenant. So it seems like she was pretty good in that her largest concern was the Ark of the Covenant, and she goes into labor and gives birth to a son. And people are saying, "You have a son," but she's just upset about everything. Everything is lost, and names her son Ichabod, which has something to do with great loss or something along those lines. Okay, uh, the Israelites are now trying to do something, build a defense or gather uh, whatever forces they have remaining, because they expect, of course, the Philistines to follow up. But the story doesn't go into that. What we find is that the Philistines take the Ark of the Covenant to their temple. Now, they worship a god, not real God, but they worship a god called Dagon. And people have had different ideas of what Dagon looked like over the years. Um, the one I heard first was that it was kind of like a mermaid, only a man. So if you think the Little Mermaid, that movie, and the father, that would give you kind of an idea. Now, other people have said, no, no, it wasn't that, but they can't offer a good explanation. The only thing we need to know is that Dagon was not a real god, but they had carved a statue of this god, had it in their temple, and they took the Ark of the Covenant and put it in front of that statue of their god. And in those days, they thought that meant that your God beat the other side's God and that you've captured their God and they can't do anything. Well, the real God doesn't work that way. So they've put God's ark into this temple. Now, realize the ark is not a huge thing. It could be carried by several men on a pole, well, two poles, and they leave it overnight. They come in the next morning and see that the statue of their god has fallen over and its face is on the floor in front of the Ark of the Covenant. That's odd. But they set their statue back up in place and think, okay, that settled that. They come in the next day, their statue has fallen over again, and the hands and the head are broken off. And suddenly they start getting a new respect for the real God, because statues just don't fall over on their own. So it's God's very small way of showing that, no, you haven't won this. Now, the temple was in a place called Ashdod. That is one of the cities. The Philistines had 5 major cities, and that's where the temple was. Well, they keep the Ark of the Covenant for a while, and suddenly people start getting sick. And then they also notice there are a lot of rats around. And so most of the thinking is that God sent rats into the area. Now, rats carry a lot of disease. These people started getting sick, and it was really gross stuff, and it was painful, and apparently a number of people died. And eventually, the Philistines in Ashdod said, I think it's that ark. Tell you what, let's send it to Gath, which is one of their other cities, and see what happens. They send it to Gath, their problems stop, but in Gath, they start having the same disease and rats and problems. And they go, okay, after a while, we need to get rid of this thing. Let's send it to Ekron. They send it to Ekron, and the people there go, we don't want anything to do with this. So the Philistines don't want this anymore, and they don't know what to do with it. They ask some of their top people, their priests, and other uh, high level people, what are we going to do about it? These people come up with what's a pretty good idea. And they said, okay, let's build a cart. Let's take a couple of cows that have had calves, in other words, baby cows, and take the calves away from them and put this ark in the wagon, have the cows hooked up, and see what they do. And if they don't go anywhere, then okay, has nothing to do with the Israelites. But if it does have something to do, if their God is causing this problem, then the cows will take the cart off back to the Israelites. And let's post some people to watch it and see what happens. Well, they do this, and the cows ignore their calves and they pull the cart straight toward Israelite territory. And the Philistines follow it until they see it's out of their country. And then they're like, okay, this problem's over. And some of the Israelites see it, and it happens to be an Israelite town that has a lot of Levites in it, and that's where the Israelites got their priest, was from the tribe of Levi. So these people were supposed to know what to do, and some of them seem to do the right thing. They take the cart and they break it up and they sacrifice the cows to God, and that part seems okay. But others of them go in there and start looking at the ark, and some look into the ark, and God says, okay, they're dead, and strikes them down. Because these people, of all people, should have known when the Ark of the Covenant is there, you cover it up. People are not supposed to be looking at it. And you definitely do not open it and look inside of it. So after that, the Ark is taken to this person's property and it stays there for years and years. And so we come to the end of this story, and it seems like there's something that's not resolved. But really, the idea behind this is that the things of God are sacred, and we have to remember to hold them sacred and treat them properly. And the way we do that is we learn what God wants us to do. The problem a lot of the Israelites had in this one is they did not know this. So it's important that we find out what God wants us to do and what He wants us to avoid doing and go with that. All right, I'm going to close up the lesson. Today's tie is full of rats, and that's to remind us of the problem that the rats had. In fact, when the Philistines sent back the cart with the ark on it, they sent these gold um, rats and tumors, which was the sores that the people were having, along with it, and that was their way of paying a fine. So they saw it. All right. Hope to see you next time, and until then, have a great day.